Hi, everyone. I am Lauren Bassin, part of the campus recruiting team out of the Chicago office. Thank you for joining. Well, before I hand it over to Payne for our social impact webinar today, I'd like to go through some of the logistics. So please submit your questions throughout the presentation. You can use the Q&A feature in the bottom right corner of the screen. Please make sure you send your questions to Tricia or to myself. And in case that your question was not answered, you can send them to careers.mba@kearney.com. So with all that covered, I would like to hand it over to Payne to start the webinar. Payne, over to you. Payne, sorry. We can see you.
I was on mute. Yes. Thank you, Lauren. Very happy to be with everyone today. My name is Payne Tang. I'm based out of Amsterdam, and I'm AT Kearney's Global Director of Social Impact. I'm very excited to share with you more about what we do at Social Impact at AT Kearney and how we want to be making a greater impact on the communities we live in. Next slide, maybe. Right. So just an introduction. So about myself first. Once upon a time, I started out my AT Kearney career in Singapore as a business analyst. I really enjoyed working in consulting, worked on a great variety of projects in 15 countries over the span of 4 years. And what I loved about AT Kearney was how you could literally work on any industry and really help our clients make an impact. And over the years, I was always very passionate about social impact, about making a difference to the communities in which we live. So I was always very involved in volunteering, very excited about learning about social entrepreneurs and how they created an impact. And so therefore, over the years, I was exploring different, pro bono consulting projects, volunteering, and I decided, and I had the opportunity to, focus on this at AT Kearney. So a little bit more about what we do in a second. And so you'll see that my passions, when I'm not busy with work, I'm also very excited about being out in nature. So that's me on the left, on vacation earlier in September this year, hiking in Switzerland with one of these glaciers that is receding super fast, which goes to show, the importance of really, thinking about how we can protect our ecosystems no matter what you do. I'm also, experimenting a little bit with developing my creative side. So one of my hobbies is taking drawing classes. So, so this is a weekly art class. One of the experiments was to draw birds. So it's a nice change from drawing PowerPoint slides and flip charts at AT Kearney. And then on the right, it looks a little bit gross, but it's actually something I'm really passionate about, worms. So once upon a time, I worked as a sanitation consultant, where the innovation was basically how could we help low-income consumers think about, sanitation solutions, because often they were not hooked up to the sewage system, and sanitation, or rather the lack of sanitation, is a big problem, especially in certain markets. So the idea was to come up with an innovative biofilter toilet that ran on red worms that could basically process this waste, and at the same time also create fertilizer that would be useful for these agricultural communities. So that was the start of my love affair with worms. And about a year ago, in my little apartment in Amsterdam, I experimented with composting my own food. So this are my little pets that I have at home, and basically experimenting with a zero waste lifestyle. So all in all, you can see the world of social impact and sustainability is really varied. And I know many of you have very exciting passions and interests and experience. So, and that's exactly the kind of passion and dedication we like to see at Kearney. So enough about myself. So with the next slide, I would like to introduce to you a little bit more about what we do at Social Impact at the firm. So our people are obviously very passionate about social impact, and our AT Kearney consultants are not by any means unique in this, right? We see this, in communities all around us, businesses, average citizens, leaders of all types. I think the kinds of social impact challenges that we see are so complex and so varied that we really need everybody to come together to work on this. And at AT Kearney, we are no different. And what we are proud of is that we are able to bring our skills, our consulting skill set, our networks, our relationships with our clients to make a difference. And so with this webinar, we really want to share with you what's important to us and invite you to join us in this journey. We conducted a social impact survey recently. 93% of our employees say social impact is important to them. This was already a rise from 2 years ago where we did the survey, and already almost 90% of our people said social impact is important. So this is a number that we expect to see grow. And we also see this reflecting in talent such as yourselves that we want to attract to the firm. We also have many different ways of allowing our employees to engage in social impact. Basically, we set the ambition that all of our employees who want to engage in social impact will have the opportunity to do so at AT Kearney. So not only do we have global social impact activities and work with our clients, we also have set up local teams in our offices, and our aim is to get more and more employees to engage in social impact activities. Next slide, please. So how we think about the world of social impact and sustainability is a massive field, and across pretty much every geography or pretty much every industry you can think of, whether it's consumer goods or oil and gas or automotive or private equity, every industry that we see is being disrupted by social impact and sustainability. There are both risks to how they operate today. There are also opportunities in terms of new businesses. And therefore, how we segment it at AT Kearney is what we call our social impact 3 E's. The first one is economic development, where it's really around thinking through how we create inclusive, sustainable growth for everyone. So this means opportunity for fair livelihoods. Is also promoting access to key infrastructure and resources like food, water, and health. The second pillar is energy and sustainability. So this is really around helping people, for example, helping organizations make the energy transition towards renewables, understand what are some of these sustainability policies that can be aligned to sustainable development. The third E for us is education and workforce. So we see a lot of disruption in terms of the future of work, and therefore this necessitates that we think about education very differently. What are the skills needed to thrive in the future, not just making you a productive employee necessarily, but also how you can be a thriving member of society as we all live and work longer. So we do a lot of work with, for example, governments on thinking through their education policy, as well as businesses in terms of thinking through the future workforce talent strategy, as well as what are the skills that they need to build given this new workforce reality. On the next slide, we have some examples of these projects. So I mentioned that the work we do spans governments, businesses, not-for-profits, social innovators, both paid as well as pro bono work. So to call out a few examples on economic development. So for example, we have worked with a foundation here to help promote health and hygiene awareness in rural India. So with that foundation, we worked on their strategy as well as their operating model and developed an implementation plan to scale up their impact in India. On energy and sustainability, one example was earlier this year, we worked on the corporate sustainability strategy of one of the world's largest chemicals company. So you can imagine that the chemicals industry is very broad. They basically serve sectors very diverse from health to agriculture to construction to food. And for each of these businesses, we helped them understand what are the different sustainability trends that are impacting these business lines, and what does this mean in terms of opportunities. So new segments that they could serve, as well as risks. So for example, certain business lines like, what is the impact of this ban on single-use plastics, and therefore what does this mean in terms of reconfiguring your product mix, and therefore your operations and your capital investments as well. So that was very powerful in terms of helping businesses think through what is a resilient strategy to help them thrive for the future. The third one, education and workforce. So yep, we provided customer segmentation and service offering definition to an organization supporting Brazilian youth education. So we do a lot of work in this space. One example that I can share is we have convened 30 different stakeholders across businesses, governments, educators, social entrepreneurs in Asia to look at how education in Asia was being disrupted, and how we, as this multi-sector platform, needed to come together to redefine, what are new models of success, how education systems need to be reshaped, how do we come up with diverse learning experiences for young people, but also those already in the workforce, given that lifelong learning is going to be so critical. And so that's what we are proud of, that we want to be part of this movement to shape societal attitudes and to drive broader systemic change towards a more cohesive and thriving education system and workforce. Next slide. So not only do we create impact through our clients and through our partners, we also want to make sure that we walk the talk, and this is an ongoing journey for all businesses, and AT Kearney ourselves are working this journey to be more sustainable in everything that we do. So in 2010, we were the first consulting firm to be carbon neutral. So 2019 now celebrates 10 years of us being carbon neutral, and we're always looking for ways to continually manage and mitigate our own environmental footprint. We are setting up green office practices across our 50+ offices around the world. And this addresses, for example, areas such as utilities, consumables and purchasing, green events. So to share some concrete examples of what's going on, our London office is on a journey to become plastic free. So basically they have stripped out all single-use plastics in, coffee cups, our lunch, the pantry consumables, across stationery as well. And this is a blueprint that we want to be rolling out across more of our offices in 2020. Some of our offices have implemented meatless Mondays. For example, in Amsterdam, the office that I'm in, we cater vegetarian lunches 3 out of 4 Fridays a month. So we want to be green in all that we do, and it will always be an ongoing journey to do this, and we welcome you to join us. We also have an AT Kearney Energy Transition Institute. So this is a not-for-profit think tank that works with governments and businesses to understand what are the key trends in energy transitions and what does this mean in terms of their strategy and operations. We are also proud to have been honored by Consulting Magazine for the past 3 years now on our outstanding social impact contributions. So we won this for our pro bono work with organizations such as Feeding America, Ashoka, which is a global network of social entrepreneurs, and finally also our work with the German Sustainability Awards that we have championed for 12 years now. We are also a proud supporter of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and we report our sustainability progress on the UN Global Compact. So you can see all of this also on our AT Kearney website, and feel free to contact me for more information here. Next slide. So yeah, at AT Kearney, I think just to iterate that we really welcome our employees to get involved in social impact. The biggest way is creating impact through our client engagements, the 3 E's that I mentioned. We also have very diverse partnerships and alliances with other stakeholders. So for example, Ashoka, the world's leading network of social entrepreneurs that I mentioned. We also have active collaborations with organizations such as the World Economic Forum, you know, the NYU Center for Sustainable Business. We also do quite a lot of pro bono work, volunteering, philanthropy with many global and local organizations. And my colleagues Chad and Dominique will share more about that with you in a second. We also invest in thought leadership and marketing because it's important to capture the learnings of all the work that we do and inspire the industry to move forward together. And then finally, as a firm, we also encourage our people to take leadership of these social impact initiatives. So we have many people who are leading green initiatives. They are, for example, mobilizing, say, fundraising efforts or volunteering efforts with, say, refugees or underprivileged communities. So there's always, regardless of your level at AT Kearney, you always have the chance to step up and drive an initiative, and our people are very supportive of that. We also have social impact externships. This is a program where consultants or management services staff can take up to 3 months off to work with a social impact organization. So in the past year so far, some examples of organizations that our consultants have basically worked with are a disability rights organization in Argentina, an education startup in Brazil. We also had one manager who worked with a social impact organization in Southeast Asia. So the opportunities are very varied. We have a list of foundations or impact organizations, and we also welcome people to propose their own ideas. And these externships are sponsored by Kearney. And then finally, we also have a Social Impact Catalyst Fund. This is our internal social innovation competition where teams can propose an idea and get funding to pursue this. So some of the awards that we have given include, AI hackathon to address the problem of food waste. We also had a team work on a diversity and inclusion hackathon together with clients. We also have later this week a team which is supporting Syrian refugees out of Istanbul. So very, very diverse initiatives, and we're very proud of all the passion of our people. And this is something that we want to welcome more people to get involved in. So that's the overview of some of the global initiatives we have at Kearney, and happy to share more during the Q&A. And for now, I'll hand it over to Dominique Harris to introduce herself and some of the great social impact work that she's been leading out of Chicago. I think you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now? I think so. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Greetings from Seattle, actually. I'm actually at a client roadshow in a hotel, so excuse the background. You may see a few people walking by, but it's good to be able to join you today and share some of my experiences with social impact at the firm. A little bit about myself. I've been with the firm for about 10 years. I started as an analyst, and I'm from the suburbs of Chicago, so I've always been very passionate about the city. Even before consulting, I thought I would be a teacher, so giving back and teaching, et cetera, has always been a passion of mine. You can see a few things on the slide here about myself. I went to Vanderbilt in the South for undergrad, went to Kellogg for my MBA, and actually was a scholar with the firm. So after being an analyst and then becoming an associate, I left for 2 years full-time to be a scholar. I came back about 5 years ago, decided to focus on LCO, leadership change in organizations, and continue my passion around building capabilities of organizations. And so I'd like to say a few words about my one of my favorite projects, and that's with the Chicago Police Department. It was a program where I was looking at in-service training. So if you think about the training police officers receive after they finish cadet school, how many hours should they receive, what topics do they need, et cetera. This was about 2 years ago when the social climate in Chicago was peaking given a lot of community events and concerns that were happening. So this project was top of mind in terms of understanding how can we best enable the officers to serve the community and protect the community. So the project took place in about 3 different steps. One, I really had to understand what was going on today. Were there set hours for police officers? Was there curriculum, course catalog, et cetera? What did officers need going forward? Then I needed to understand what was going on in the market and what was best in class. So that required talking to LAPD, NYPD, and a number of other police departments across the country, as well as connecting with corporations like Walmart, Google, Kroger, to understand how are they training their different forces, sales forces, or even warehouse workers, et cetera, people who are on the ground constantly, where it's hard to pull them off of their job, but how are you training them and keeping them upskilled? And then finally, the final step was determining the strategy or recommendation for the department moving forward. It was quite a journey. I was in the police department every day of the week, really working side by side with lieutenants, captains, and then ultimately presenting to the superintendent of police. My recommendation had a few key components. 1, officers needed to receive 40 hours of training, and then 2, a whole curriculum of mandatory and elective courses for them to focus on taking, and the 5-year ramp-up plan to get there. It was a great experience. I was challenged by the superintendent on should it be 5 years, and I pushed forward to say, yes, you need 5 years, you need the resources, and even outlined a plan for a learning and development team to support the training of the officers. Ultimately, the police department and superintendent accepted the recommendations. It was presented on the local news as something that they were committed to, and they're still doing it today. So it was a great opportunity for me to give back to the city of Chicago and my community, and also just learn a great deal about the officers that serve us every day. So that's my experience with social impact. I'm happy to talk more about that project, other things we do around Chicago or our offices in the U.S., but now I'll hand it over to Chad, who will talk about his experience.
Chad, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Dominique. So similar to Dominique, I'll introduce myself. So my name is Chad Payne, currently in New York. I'm an associate based out of our New York office. I've been with the firm for 3 years now. I joined as an analyst after graduating from the University of Pennsylvania from the Wharton School. As you'll see on my profile, I am Canadian, so I was born and raised in Vancouver, Canada, and then moved to the U.S. for school and have been here since. Outside of work, when I'm not doing projects and whatnot, I love sneakers and stuff. I love to bake. I'm also very athletic, and I actually just ran the New York Marathon 2 days ago. So thankfully did not have to travel because I'm not moving very fast these days. But in terms of my project experience with social impact, I think for me it's twofold, both on the project side as well as stuff that I do inside the office as well as outside. So I'll focus on what I've done at the firm so far. But this past year, in January, I had the opportunity to work with Feeding America. Feeding America is a national hunger relief organization which oversees a network of over 200 different food banks, shelters, and food kitchens throughout America. It's the largest organization involved, and they have a retail channel, which is where they'll work with your traditional retailers like your Krogers, your Walmarts, even your Walgreens and whatnot, and they will collect different food donations from them. And this is stuff at the end of the day that goes undonated, so it might be misfit products or stuff that has a little low perishability but needs to go off the shelves. With those products, they'll then collect them through different means of trucks and different vehicles to come by, and once they collect the foods, they'll donate it to their respective food banks and food shelters throughout the U.S. The organization's been around, I believe, since the 1980s, and as of late, the program has started to slow down in the retail channel. So they brought in A.T. Kearney, and we've had experience with working with them in the past to really understand how the retail channel has been slowing down and what are the growth opportunities in the market. So first off, what we did is we conducted a lot of expert interviews, not only with people who have worked throughout this food reconciliation process, but also those at the company, just to understand how things operate and get our good bearings, because not too many of us had heard about how the donation process works, and it's a lot more intricate than we thought. After understanding that, we then looked at the data to see which retailers have been contributing the most, have been slowing down, what's been happening there, how have food quantities and categories they've received changed over the years, and so forth. Once we did that on a lot of data collection, we'd often have a weekly touch point just explaining what we were able to do and accomplish and what kind of questions we had to move forward. Where the real value came from us was not just understanding how the program has performed historically, but understanding where the opportunities lie. And what we started to see were that a lot of the larger retailers were starting to take a lot of their own conservative sustainability initiatives internally. And that's a great thing at the end of the day, because they're able to work on their footprint and able to be a bit more productive and efficient with their own inventories. But at the same time, it led to less food for feeding America. What we also saw was that oftentimes for these retailers or stores that are in very rural areas, the people that are responsible for picking up the foods don't want to make those long trips to go get the donations. So what we did was ultimately we had to see in different tiers how the different retailers were operating in each location to understand what their donation volume was on a per pickup basis, and understanding how we can help the different food banks and food reconciliation services have the resources that they need. So understanding how much square footage they need to store inventory, how many trucks they needed to pick up, how many volunteers they needed to hire, and how many grants and donation money they need to receive throughout the year. Ultimately, we're able to identify a 1.5 billion pound increase in donations over the next 5 years, which is an 80% volume increase from how they were performing as of 2018. We ultimately, as myself, the analyst, myself as an associate, with an analyst, the partner and principal, presented our recommendation to the Chief Supply Chain Officer, as well as other directors and VPs of the organization. They're very receptive to our questions. We now have this goal in mind of getting 3 billion donations from the retail, 3 billion pounds worth of donations from the retail channel, and really look to us to see how our different implementation strategies will work. And they're getting very granular as well, understanding how many pickups need to happen from this specific food bank, how much pounds this retailer needs to give on a daily basis, and seeing how that can improve, and so forth. Overall, hunger is a very big issue in the US. 1 in 8 people suffer from hunger every day. So it was great to identify these opportunities to help them expand their performance and also help address this issue of hunger that's a widespread issue throughout the US. So I'm happy to talk a bit more about my experiences as well with social impact at the firm as well as outside of the firm, and how I balance that with my consulting time. But as of right now, I think we're going to pass it to Lauren to do some Q&A.
All right, thanks, Chad. I've been receiving a few questions. So, Chad, I'm going to ask the first question for you about your project, as you just mentioned it. So there was a question around how big was the team that you worked with, and also how teams differ between social impact projects and also other types of projects.
Yeah, so as I said in the question, the team dynamics for us is we had a partner who oversaw the relationship between Feeding America and myself. We had a principal who was involved in the day-to-day operations, but then we also had myself and an analyst, and for the most part as an associate, I was responsible for the day-to-day project responsibilities. So that's a lot of the analysis, a lot of putting the pages together, all the expert interviews, and a lot of the client relationships too, and having those weekly touch points, as well as leading presentations when we presented in our office in Chicago at the midpoint of the project and the end. The way I would say this differs is maybe from a scale standpoint. So oftentimes on a project, there might be a manager in between, but this social responsibility or project gave me the opportunity to step up into more of a managerial role and have that leadership exposure. And not only getting the opportunity to present to some C-suite executives at the organization, but walk away saying this was the impact that I had and how I was able to lead the team really stood out. I think you'll also see that as an associate, as I believe most of your MBA students, coming into AT Kearney, you'll have the opportunity to lead and manage as well. So having a chance to work with an analyst and have her contribute and see that her analysis is having impact at the end of the day really stood out in this project for me.
Great, thanks, Chad. Another question we had is now for Payne. If consultants are specifically dedicated to social impact contribution, or if all the employees have to dedicate some of their time to that?
Sure. Great question. There are a few layers to that. So we have a core social impact team. So the people on my team, we're full-time on social impact, and then we basically work on client engagements, partnerships, some of the firm sustainability initiatives. But we also basically work across the team. So across the AT Kearney's core industry or service practices, we have social impact landing points or people who have expertise or experience in this area. So for example, in our energy and process industries and practice, then you also have a team there who's doing a lot on helping their clients with, for example, energy transition, waste reduction. In our consumer goods practice, you also have a whole bunch of people who are experts in, for example, sustainable packaging. How do we look at, for example, this rise of consumers and their purchasing preferences and how that's evolving. And I would say the next layer of people who are getting involved would also be our colleagues who are working on sustainability or social impact initiatives. And then that would be more on a part-time basis. So for example, some of these pro bono projects that we do, you might be spending a few hours of time a week on that side by side with your consulting projects, or you might be, for example, assisting with mentoring or fundraising on ad hoc initiatives. So when you're on a client project, that tends to be full-time. We also have some dedicated pro bono projects where you would have a team staffed for, say, a few weeks or a few months on that project. Or sometimes you have a model where people are seconded. So for example, we do quite a lot of work with the World Economic Forum every year, in which case we have consultants who are seconded for, say, a year, 18 months, working on that project. So as I mentioned before, our ambition is that everyone at AT Kearney who wants to engage on social impact should have the opportunity to do so, which is why we have a combination of dedicated resourcing as well as more flexible models depending on your interests and the opportunity.
Great. Thanks for sharing, Payne. Next question for Dominique now. Dominique, how did you get involved with this project you mentioned? Did you seek it out, or did someone come to you with this work?
Sure. So I got involved with this project, I would say in a couple ways. One, I think ever since I've been with the firm, I've made it very clear that I am very interested in social impact. And so making sure that staffing managers are aware and any managers or partners that I work with are aware. And so, typically when we're getting staffed, it's about what's in the pipeline, your skill set, things like that. And so at the time when I was available on the beach and talking to the staffing manager about some of my options, there was a partner in the Chicago office who also had this project come up. And the three of us were able to connect and found that it was the right fit. So the way I personally got staffed on this was really around working with the staffing manager and then also having a relationship with the partner in the office.
Great. Another question now for Payne. I'm curious how indeed environmental sustainability is on traditional projects and partnerships. Is this something that is growing?
On environmental sustainability in our projects and partnerships?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, it's growing. So I think what we've seen in our consulting relationships with our clients, in the past, clients used to approach, sustainability a little bit like, okay, it's it's something that needs to be done. So for example, you need to mitigate, say, risk in your supply chain. You needed to, watch out for any consumer blowback. So it was a little bit of like, okay, let's do this because we kind of have to. And CSR was also seen very much from that lens. It was a responsibility, it was an obligation. And I'm happy to say that mindset has really shifted. Most of the businesses now are starting to think about sustainability, not just environmental sustainability, but sustainability more holistically in your triple bottom line. as, how do we think about how we, thrive with our communities? How do we become a more inclusive business and think about creating shared value creation? A very concrete example, for instance, at the moment we are partnering with this Ashoka, this network of social entrepreneurs that I had mentioned, together with one of our joint clients who is a leader in the food business. So in the past, clients like this would think about, working with social entrepreneurs in a very kind of, we will give you funding, we will give you mentorship, but it was like, we will give you all of these things. And the narrative has now shifted where they are thinking about, hey, we respect you as, almost, as a source of innovation and source of ideas. You guys in the social entrepreneurship space are really disrupting value chains. You are finding ways to deliver products to the last mile in ways that traditional corporate supply chains never reached. You are thinking about redesigning products at a fraction of the cost. How can we in our R&D teams think about that? So I like how businesses are really thinking about this social innovation as a source of new ideas, new value models. More and more clients are coming to us to broaden the sustainability discussion from just, risk mitigation or doing what we have to do to really looking at value creation and differentiation. So we see this indeed in more and more projects. Specifically on environmental sustainability, it's also becoming a measure of what of business objectives. Pretty much in every Fortune 500 company these days, if you look at their strategy, sustainability is always going to be a pillar for them. Everything from, waste reduction to, being more energy efficient, to redesigning products, to, contributing to a particular UN SDG. We see that coming all the way through very, very strongly. We ourselves as AT Kearney, therefore, are also making sure that we do our best to continue to improve on our own environmental footprint. So as our clients think about, their own environmental footprint, they also expect their supply chain, which includes us as their consultants, to also, keep improving in terms of what we disclose, how we run our business. And likewise, we as AT Kearney are also expecting our own suppliers and our partners to follow suit. So overall, it's a very nice momentum that we're seeing in the industry to drive for sustainability.
All right. Thank you, Payne. Another question now for Chad and Dominique. What volunteer work have you done while working at AT Kearney? And Payne, also feel free to jump if you have any comments.
Sure. So I'll let Chad go first.
Sure. So for myself, in the New York office, oftentimes we'll bring in local organizations to come work with us. So last year, I had the opportunity to work with an organization called Lincoln Watts, which is focused on students or people who didn't have the opportunity to finish their college degree when they were of age or as teenagers. So what we did is we wanted to prepare those more adult students for the opportunity to go into the workforce and have interviews and be the best candidate they can be. So we brought those students into the New York office. We gave them a tour of our facilities and our venue, and we have a great view of Times Square from the 42nd floor of our building, 36th floor. But it was an amazing view, and we had the chance to walk them through an interview workshop where we helped cater their stories, answer different questions. We wanted to help them use their experiences that they've had outside of school to help present themselves as great candidates. And overall, it was a great event that we've been able to do every year. And also in New York, we do similar events as well with other organizations, generally catered towards skills that they need at that time. So that's resume reviews, more interview workshops, sometimes just on professionalism and office dress code. So always great to use the things that we maybe see as little or just commonplace knowledge in consulting to help others.
Thanks, Chad. Yeah, so in terms of volunteer work, I would say across all of our offices, there's a number of opportunities throughout the year to do so. It may be led through your office or even led through some of our other networks throughout the firm. And so I want to give two examples. One was a more recent example with our African American network. we recently had a professional development forum. As part of that forum with bringing the network together to one central location, which was Chicago, we did about a half day or 2 to 3 hour, I would say, volunteer activity with Inspiration Foods. And this was on the southwest side of Chicago, really just helping to tend to their garden. So this was a volunteer activity as part of our just coming together as a community. And that's one example of how this may happen throughout the offices throughout the year. Another example is with Junior Achievement. And that's been a longstanding tradition with the Chicago office. We sponsor a school on the south side of Chicago, and every year we go and do about, I believe, 4 to 5 classes of teaching students about business or about personal finance, et cetera. So you volunteer your time for a Friday afternoon and teach a course and really just get some time to engage with some of the youth of the city.
Very cool. Thank you. One last question. Now for Payne. Do all consultants get a chance to do the social impact externship, or is it conditional upon some criteria like years you have been with the firm or anything else?
Sure. The externship program basically is targeting consultants who have at least 2 to 3 years work experience. The reason for that is because you will be acting on your own in that impact organization for 3 months, right? So you're on your own with the client, with the NGO leadership. So oftentimes you're working in an environment that's quite different to what you've been used to compared to like a more traditional corporate type of consulting environment. So they might be, working in a different industry of a different scale, different kind of setup, more complex challenges. So for that reason, we are seeking more experienced consultants who can independently drive, that level of stakeholder engagement as well as transformation for the partner organizations. So our prerequisites are, 2 to 3 years of consulting experience. And you also need the support of your mentor and your leadership, what we call the unit leadership. So I think externships is just one example of how you can, get hands-on social impact experiences. We're also looking at broadening this program so that more people can participate. So this could be, for example, we have a tie-up with this university that's leading this sustainable innovation course, which also includes a practical component. So we're always exploring how we can broaden these kinds of experiences. And from time to time, we also have consultants who come and say, hey, I want to pursue my own opportunity. So one example is we had a consultant in Australia who took a leave of absence for 6 months to work on a concept that he had, which is basically helping prison offenders set up their own businesses as well. So he did that for 6 months. Kearney supported him, introduced him to our clients. So yeah, we are always looking for more ideas about how we can create opportunities for our people to learn and give back. So very happy to hear of what suggestions you might have as well.
All right. Thanks so much for your participation today at this webinar. I just wanted to transition here to the best ways to stay connected with us after this webinar. So our contact information is on the screen. Feel free to send us any other questions you have, and also visit our social impact website. And before we finish the webinar, I wanted to thank you all for joining today. We know this topic drives a lot of interest, and we hope you found this interesting as you begin meeting with different firms throughout the recruiting season. So thank you all so much, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.